Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think you'll recognize that song as being the theme song for the Red Skelton TV show, which is, well, still in the minds of many of our listeners, I'm sure. Arthur Marx, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ken.
It is a real pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, it's interesting to be talking cross-country like this.
You know, due to the fact that we have such a great line today, it almost sounds like you're in studio. And we'll share about 25 minutes together, if it's okay.
You know, it'd be great.
Let me just say that I have to mention this, of course, that your father was Groucho Marx, one of one of my favorite comedians. Thanks to the Marx Brothers.
Yeah.
Are remembered by so many people. And I suppose comedians have been always close to you.
Well, I sort of grew up with them. My father he didn't really hang around with actors so much, but he did have a lot of friends who were comics, George Behrens and Jack Benny and those people. So frequently I would be having lunch with them and things like that.
I know you mentioned in the book on Red Skelton that Red didn't like to hang around with comedians because he said they were always trying to top each other. Was that the case with your father and, say, Jack Benny and George Behrens?
Well, yeah, they were. I remember once my father had a party at his house, and he had about 8 of the comedians there: Behrens, Milton Berle, Phil Silvers, Jessel, and God, I thought it was going to be and Jack Benny, and I thought it was going to be very funny, all of them sitting around, and it seemed like they were all afraid to open their mouths at that party, and they just sat around, and Phil Silvers walked over to me at one point, kind of bored looking, and says, "It's been a grand crossing." I don't know if you know what that means, but on a bored ship, a bunch of people sit around, they have nothing to say to each other, or they're just bored. Anyway, it just seemed like they didn't want to talk that night. I've been on other occasions when they had their Hillcrest Round Table, where they would be very funny. And one of their big favorites was George Jessel. The other comedians used to bow to him. They thought he was the funniest.
You know,
he was like the comedian's comedian. He wasn't that funny to the rest of the country, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. You made it up. Well, you didn't make it up. It's written in the book. I remember reading it. You say that writers. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. It's hard to get organized here. But you said that writers didn't like particularly to write for Red Skelton because so often he would make lines that were actually written by the writers appear to be ad-libs. Did your father, I want to just talk to you about Groucho for a second, did your father come up with all of those spontaneous things that we've heard on radio and on television off the top of his head? Were many of those organized ahead of time?
Well, it depends. Many times his ad-libs were real ad-libs, but when he was doing You Bet Your Life, which was supposed to be ad-lib, but wasn't ad-lib at all, it was all written out ahead of time. In most cases, he would never see the contestants, so that part was fairly honest. But they found out after beginning the show strictly ad-lib that it didn't work because he needed someone who would come back with the right line in order for him to ad-lib something funny, and often they would get a contestant on it would be dull, and then they'd be stuck.
There's one classic example. I don't know, you're probably familiar with the 3 hours, 51 seconds, 29 minutes, or whatever it is with the Marx Brothers. There's one, I've got the record set, and I was listening to it just a couple of weeks ago, and there's one classic example of Harry Von Zell and your father, Groucho, both grabbing the same line at the same time, reading it off of some card. And it was obviously an ad-lib, I would assume, because Groucho says, "You want it or should I take it?" One of those. And Harry went ahead and delivered it, and then Groucho said, "See, it wasn't worth it."
Yeah.
Which
I don't remember that incident. I didn't know that he worked with Von Zell. It must have been on some guest show.
It was evidently a radio show from years ago. But anyway, let's talk.
He was a good ad-libber. He was funny around the house, and probably the funniest to sit around with, I think, when he was young, not in his older days.
You're probably so tired of hearing people talk about your father and you being the son of Groucho, I would think. You are credit on your own right. I have to tell folks that you wrote The Impossible Years, which was a super smash Broadway hit and also turned into a motion picture that I think starred David Niven.
It's still playing 17 years later.
Oh, man. And then you wrote Minnie's Boys.
Yeah, and that's going on in 3 weeks. It's going into rehearsal with Martha Ray and the Hudson brothers playing the Marx Brothers. And and if it goes well out here, they're thinking of taking it back to Broadway.
That's unbelievable. And of course, all the books you've written too, like Son of Groucho, and the latest being Red Skelton, and that's what we're talking about today. Let me break for a commercial, if it's okay with you, Arthur.
Yeah.
And we'll get back with our conversation. It's 11 minutes past 10 o'clock.
The days of turning the thermostat up or down every time you feel slightly uncomfortable are over. But though we're all going to have to get used to a little less heat or a little less air conditioning, that doesn't mean your home has to be uncomfortable. This is a message from Illinois Power about ways to save a lot of energy and still have a comfortable home the year round. It's all spelled out in National Energy Watch, a program sponsored by Illinois Power and utility companies throughout the country. The standards set by the National Energy Watch cover insulation, weather stripping, storm doors and windows, and efficient use of your home appliances. A home that meets these standards is awarded the National Energy Watch decal. And it's something worth having because that red, white, and blue decal is the symbol of a home that's worth more because it conserves energy. We'll be glad to help you earn the National Energy Watch Award and enjoy a more comfortable home. Just ask the Energy Use Advisor at Illinois Power.
Great savings for men during Bergner's anniversary sale. Save 20 to 33% and more on Arrow and Van Heusen dress shirts. Regular $14 to $20. And now, 2 for $18.99. Select from tapered and gentleman's fit in assorted colors and patterns. And save on famous maker neckwear. Now, 3 for $12.99. Save a full 28% on gold toe hosiery. Shaggies, regularly 2 1/4, now 4 pair for $6.49. Savings of 20 to 33% and more during Bergner's anniversary sale.
If you're into loafing, come loaf with us. Hi, this is Jeff Procknell and Mr. Donut. My wife Connie and I are the newest loafers in town and proud of it. That's right, Mr. Donut has fresh baked bread in 7 delicious varieties. Choose from regular white, rye, French, Italian, raisin, and cinnamon. Plus, Mr. Donut even has brownies. Stop in for a loaf with a terrific donut and a cup of coffee from the newest loafers in town at Mr. Donut, 1310 East Empire.
Now get 2 dozen cake donut holes for 99 cents at Mr. Donut.
13 minutes after 10 o'clock. Arthur Marx is our guest this morning, author of a new book on Red Skelton. Arthur, I've noticed that this particular book is an unauthorized biography of Skelton. That doesn't happen all that often, I wouldn't think.
Well, a lot of the books are unauthorized. It doesn't often happen that they're on the cover. And actually, I'll tell you a funny thing. When this ran the National Enquirer, because they liked it so much, they serialized it. Well, Red apparently saw a bit of it in there, and it didn't appeal to him. I think it was mainly the way they had set it up, not the way I'd written it. So he called the publisher and asked them if they would mind putting unauthorized on the biography, because he didn't want people to know that he had anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought it would be a good publicity thing, so we said, why not?
I've seen some other things. Why should Red Skelton be mad about this book or angry about it?
Well, I don't know if a lot of my friends have read the book now who didn't know anything about Skelton, and they said they don't understand either. They think he comes off very sympathetically.
I think so, too, and it gives you an idea that he really worked very, very hard at what he really wanted to do.
And he really took it seriously enough to become almost, well, I would say he was neurotic about it. Certainly, he worried, so that would prove that he was that he was conscientious.
Red wasn't that good in school, as I understand it, but one day he happened to catch Ed Wynn, who gave him a ticket to see his show, and Ed Wynn was really the inspiration to get Skelton started.
I think that probably got him started. When he went backstage and saw the show, he didn't even realize it was Ed Wynn when the guy gave him the ticket on the street. He didn't know Ed Wynn either, but he saw him up on the stage and thought he was funny and went back and asked him advice. This was a long time ago, 1910 or 13. And years later, I don't know if people even remember Ed Wynn, but Ed Wynn was in trouble, and he was making kind of a comeback as a serious actor on Playhouse 90, and he became so worried about this Wynn that he started drinking, and he was bombed about 6 hours before the show went on, and Skelton had to come to his rescue and tried to walk this drunkenness off him, and even assured the producers that if Wynn couldn't go on, he would go on in his place and give Wynn the money. Anyway, he finally got Wynn sobered up, and Wynn went on, and I think he got an award for this performance. But anyway, it shows that Red's a pretty nice guy.
Red went to Canada. I think he had to make it in Canada before he could actually make it in this country, and became known as the Canadian comedian.
Yeah, he had a big hit up there. Started off kind of shaky. He got a lucky booking up there in a place called the Lido Club, I think it was, and he bombed the first night. And his manager stuck with him, and they figured out what was wrong with his act. And pretty soon he caught on with the Canadian audiences, and he was going back and forth between Montreal and Toronto, and it became a big hit up there. And then word reached the States that he was funny, and they brought him down to Washington, D.C. And he was so funny there, playing a vaudeville engagement, that he was invited to the White House for President Roosevelt's birthday dinner. And Red was a big hit at the birthday dinner when Roosevelt started to lift his old-fashioned to his lips to take a sip. Red grabbed the glass out of his hand and said, "I wouldn't touch that if I were you, Mr. President. I've been rolled in joints like this." Well, that was a big hit there. Mickey Rooney was there, and Rooney phoned up Louis B. Mayer, who was the head of MGM, and said, "You ought to sign this guy up for pictures." And that's eventually what happened.
Do you see kind of a split personality in Red Skelton? The fact that when he's in public, he's done all sorts of crazy things, like when his wife didn't want him to buy something in the store, he'd actually throw a tantrum, get on the floor and pound and kick almost like a child.
Yeah.
And yet when he's on his own, it seems like he's very quiet and calm and very natural.
Well, he was a serious person, and like a lot of comedians, insecure, and he was kind of a brooder, and he always had a lot of problems almost as soon as he reached around 1940, when he became a star. Then he started having marital troubles with his first wife, Edna, who was his manager.
And she'd helped him through all those walkathons that he did, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing in his life. I don't think anybody knows that he used to MC those dance marathons. In fact, I don't think anybody remembers that they had to have an MC. They just have visions of these people dragging themselves around the floor. Anyway, he used to get up and entertain while people were dragging themselves around the floor, and Edna turned out to be one of the contestants. That was his first wife, and she won a contest in Kansas City for being on her feet 2.5 months. She got $500 for that. And Red was so impressed, he proposed to her on the spot. And after they got married, she more or less quit entertaining to manage him and act as his mother substitute and head writer, and she kind of managed him right to the top. And then by 1940, when he became a star and he moved to Hollywood, I guess he started meeting other young girls around the studios and things, and he got, I don't know what it was, he might have got fed up with having Edna bossing him around, or having a wife acting in that capacity anyway. They split up, and he married Georgia. So he always had trouble. And then not long after that, he started drinking because of the show was failing.
You know,
then after he pulled out of that, and his television show became a big hit, and he was on the air for 18 years, then his son got leukemia, and then he went through that tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a lot to be serious about.
He's on his third marriage, I believe, now, right?
Yeah, after he divorced Georgia and she committed suicide, he met this new wife in Palm Springs, and they seem to be very happy from what I understand.
You know, really, I guess in a lot of cases, comedy and tragedy have gone side by side. There's pathos in comedy and pathos maybe. Just before we went on the air, Arthur, I know you mentioned that there really aren't any real superstar comedians today like there were years ago. I mean, there are still a few, but by golly, the majority of them, you just don't see comedies like you used to. And maybe
my father claims it's because there isn't any vaudeville anymore to train them, and that was a great training ground because you didn't have to be a big star in vaudeville to get out there and work on your act and hone it and get the jokes right.
But it seems like so many comedians came out of very, very poor areas, right, and out of poverty.
Well, that's true. I can't really explain it. I don't know any comedian who didn't come out of poverty.
Do you remember as a youngster?
I guess that they were one of the reasons is that because they were so poor, they didn't have a chance to go to school and get a real education. So the only thing you could go into without an education was show business.
Do you suppose that maybe that's what made them, though? They kept struggling and trying so hard. What would motivate a person like Red Skelton to actually eat his necktie time after time, just to make people laugh, and actually do falls and possibly do things that would injure him seriously, just for a laugh?
In a way, it's an attention getter. I think most performers, actors, serious actors, or comedians really enjoy being in the spotlight, even though it may worry them and make them nervous. They still like it, and that's what motivates someone. My father would frequently do something funny out in public, even though he claimed he wasn't a ham, just to get people's attention. He didn't like it, I guess. If he wouldn't be an actor, he didn't like it.
Arthur Marx is our guest, Groucho's son, author of a new book entitled Red Skelton. And I'll tell you what, if we have a few moments here, maybe we can just take some phone calls from the audience. Is that okay with you, Arthur?
Sure, sure.
829-2345. If you have a question about Red Skelton, or even the Marx Brothers, I would think, or Arthur, what he's been doing, why, feel free to give us a call, 829-2345 or 1-800-322-9377. I have a few more questions, too, I'd like to ask, and we'll get back. If you get a ringing line, please hang on to it. It's 21 minutes past 10 o'clock.
Do you know what the top prize is in the new Illinois State Lottery 50-cent weekly pot of gold game? Well, we don't either. Because for the first time, we've got a top prize that could actually grow from week to week. It's the big weekly jackpot, a prize you can win with a ticket you buy. There's no waiting for preliminary or grand prize drawings. The weekly jackpot will grow at the rate of $90,000 for every million tickets sold, with a guaranteed minimum of $15,000. So there's no telling what it'll be from week to week. What's more, if nobody hits the jackpot this week, it'll be added to the following week's jackpot. So we're talking about a prize that could get mighty big, mighty fast. Of course, there's more to this game than the jackpot. There are all kinds of smaller prizes, too, from $5 to $2,500. So don't miss out on a most unusual lottery game. Ask for the new 50-cent pot of gold ticket. Who knows? This could be your chance to win your pot of gold.
Dot's Beauty Shop is not just for blow-dry styles, or not just for perms, or not just for shampoo and sets. Dot's has it all, something for everyone in hairstyling. And now Renee offers a special for students. They get special rates and Renee's quality expertise in hair shaping and styling. Just call 828-4714 or stop by Dot's Beauty Shop, 1108 North Main. Meet Renee and Marie. Students, be sure to take advantage of their special low prices.
WW Bake Shop fills your trick-or-treat bag with a free Halloween cookie. Just clip the Penny Saver coupon and take it to either WW Bake Shop location for one of their very special Halloween cookies free. Try their donuts, too. They're the best and freshest in town. Beat the Cookie Monster. Head to WW Bake Shop for your free Halloween cookie with Penny Saver coupon. In Normal, stop at Kingsley and Dale. In Bloomington, they're at 422 North Main Street.
Bloomington actually is about, 150, maybe 190 miles south of Chicago. I do know your father played in Bloomington. In fact, all the Marx Brothers did.
Well, they lived in Chicago for a long time when they were growing up. Before they, around 1916, 1917, when we first got in World War I, they lived there on Grand Boulevard.
Do you remember times being particularly tough when you were a youngster with your father in show business? Or was it, by the time you came around, were things really rolling pretty smoothly for the Marx Brothers?
Well, by the time they were still traveling in vaudeville by the time I was born, but they were more or less in big-time vaudeville at that point. They were making what was pretty good money for those days. They still had to go from hotel to hotel and week to week, and my father, the money wasn't that big compared with what's being made today, you know, but I think we were fairly comfortable. There wasn't any such thing as ever starving. Before I was born, my father had a rough time, so did the Marx Brothers in general.
Did they? Now, you mentioned in the book about Red Skelton. Red Skelton was very, very hesitant to get into television. He'd made it with MGM and had made some fairly successful pictures. In fact, I think The Fuller Brush Man maybe was one of the best. And then some more or less flops, too. And, of course, MGM was going through a period when television was coming in where they really were trying to make an all-out effort to get the public aware of their films. They came out with, CinemaScope and all of the rest, 3D pictures. And there's a classic story, it all of a sudden just pops into my mind, Arthur, about how MGM gathered all of its stars. Anybody who was anybody who make a contribution to the motion picture biz had gathered together. And Skelton arrived late, didn't he?
Yeah, that was I think their 50th anniversary, and having a picture taken. Everybody was there: Clark Gable, Greer Garson, Spencer Tracy, Hepburn. Do name any star that was big was in that picture. There's about 50 of them, and Skelton arrived late. They were all posed, and he got up in front of them and stood up on a chair, and he says, "Okay, everybody, you can go home. The part's been filled."
He was pretty
funny, huh?
He was pretty good when it came to ad-libs, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was very good. He felt more comfortable doing physical comedy, though, and pantomime than he did with lines. But he must have been pretty good with lines, because when he did his early radio show, it was a big hit back in 1939. He and Bob Hope were on the same night, but when Hope was just starting out too, and the two of them, it was a big night in radio. People didn't go out.
Of course, he was afraid to make that transition into television, and I wanted to get this up there, too, because I know that your father and the brothers had been doing live shows. All of a sudden, when Coconuts came along, were they hesitant about doing a motion picture?
No, I don't think so. They were happy to do picture in those days. The transition didn't seem too bad at that point. Matter of fact, they made their first movie, Coconuts, in Astoria, Long Island, where they were playing Animal Crackers on Broadway at night. So they were doing two things at once there and able to manage it.
Okay, but Coconuts was a bunch of material that they'd been doing for years and years, wasn't it?
That's right. But no, Coconuts was a play written by George Kaufman and Maury Riskin.
But still, wasn't the Viaduct something they'd done on stage?
Well, they had worked it out probably, but that was basically a new thing. And Animal Crackers was also written by Kaufman and Riskin.
Okay.
And that was a basically new play. Now, I'll Say She Is, which was their first show back in 22 and 23, that was basically junk and stuff put together from years in vaudeville.
Okay.
And that was a big hit.
I know you mentioned that Skelton had a bunch of material at his command, but he always tried to do the old thing, too, on television, stuff he was really sure of.
Had to be familiar. That's why his first year on television he was big, because he had all this old material that he'd worked out, and it was great, like Guzzler's Gin and the Donut Dunking Act, and that stuff was just perfection. He knew where all the laughs were, but then after a year he'd used up all his old stuff, and he had to depend on new stuff, and he didn't feel that dependent. He didn't feel that comfortable with it, and he also didn't like having to worry about where the camera was and having to keep watch markers on the stage. And he just had a bad year, and he began worried himself, and his ratings started to go downhill, and he started drinking, and that's what his problem was. But he just didn't want to go into television because of that very reason, and a lot of the comics were afraid of that transition. That was just too hard. It was easy in radio. They just got up and read lines, and you said, here's the set, and we're standing on the moon, and the people believed it.
Right.
They had to show it. It was a big problem. Like doing a small movie every week. My father was lucky because he was doing a show that didn't have any problem. He was doing You Bet Your Life on radio, and all they did when they went into television was just photograph the radio show. Just sitting there with the mics and everything, no different set, nothing. So he didn't have to worry about it, and that's how he became really. He made the transition better than any of them, and it stayed on for 15 years, I think.
Arthur, the time has gone by very, very quickly. I didn't get to the phone lines like I wanted to, and I guess I've been greedy as far as getting the questions to you this morning. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Well, I'm glad you liked the book, and I hope some people read it back there.
Red Skelton, put out by E.P. Dutton, as I recall, and it's available now in the bookstores. You're also working on another play, I think.
Yeah, we have a new play called Hello, My Name Is. It's about a convention. It's about a group of businessmen at a convention, at a businessman's convention.
Arthur, thank you very much. We'll watch for that play, and of course we'll look for the book too, Red Skelton.
All right, and watch Alice too. I'm the head writer on that, one of the head writers.
I hadn't realized it.
Did you know that?
No.
Well, look at the credits on Sunday night.
Listen, I'll watch for your name. I know that means a lot to a writer.
Okay. Thanks a lot for calling.